That was really an auspicious beginning to our Novel Night series. And as I said, Alan's book and a couple of others that he's written are available on the table over there if you're interested. Our next reader tonight is Joe Milazzo. And Joe is the author of, and I cannot say, the Crepuscule, is that?
Perfect.
Crepuscule W/Nellie. And this is the book I assume he'll be reading from tonight that we have here. He is also the author of the Habiliments that will be coming in later in 2015, which is a volume of poetry. And along with Janice Lee and Eric Lindley, Joe edits the online interdisciplinary arts journal Out of Nothing, which is a lot of fun. It's always fun to look at. I've checked it out after you sent us this stuff. And he is also a contributing editor at Entropy and the proprietor of you just picked these words I can't say. Imipolex. Okay, keep it simple. Imipolex Press. Joe lives and works in Dallas, Texas, and he braved the freezing rain to come down here and read to us. So, thanks, Joe.
Thank you. I wasn't fully prepared. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thanks, Alan, for allowing me to share your opportunity to share your work. So I'm going to do a little bit of setup about this novel. The title, as difficult as it is to say, is not entirely my fault. It's named after a composition by the jazz pianist and composer Thelonious Monk. It's a composition that was written for his wife. And the novel is basically a very fictionalized account of some years in the life of Thelonious Monk and his wife. The focus is much more on his wife, Nellie. And there's another woman who is very important in their lives, and you can't make this stuff up. Her name was the Baroness Pannonica de Koenigswarter. And she was a member of a royal family. She had married into a royal family. Her own background was she was a disgraced member of the Rothschild family. But she was a great patron of jazz in New York in the 50s. And was a friend to many of the most famous African-American jazz musicians of the time. She was probably most famous in her day as a sort of tabloid figure. Charlie Parker died in her hotel room. So she was a sort of scandal sheet figure, but she was a very important person in Thelonious Monk's life. And in fact, he spent the last 10 years of his life living with her and not his family. So the portion of this novel I'm going to read, which is set in the 50s in New York, and it's right after an event that happened. Thelonious Monk, as we sort of move through these pages, has either spent time in prison or a mental hospital. It's not entirely clear. He was arrested in possession of narcotics, which at the time in New York was a very bad thing to happen to you because you would lose what was called your cabaret card. And your cabaret card was basically a license that was given to you by the New York Police Department that allowed you to perform in nightclubs. So for a musician to lose their cabaret card was basically for them to lose their opportunity to make a living at their music. So it's put a lot of stress on his family. And the portion that I'm going to read, and I am going to have to take off my glasses. I'm getting to that age now. The portion of this that I'm going to read is the Baroness has chosen to throw a party in celebration of Monk leaving whatever facility he's been in and returning to the scene, which is what they would have called it at the time. So as you'll hear, all of these musicians have been invited to the Baroness's estate in Weehawken, New Jersey, which is just across the river from New York. What else should I tell you? The novel is told from alternating points of view. We get lots of stuff from Nellie's point of view, lots of stuff from the Baroness's point of view. There's also a figure, Frank, who is the Baroness's butler, valet, right-hand man, maybe something else. And so just note that the narration kind of moves around a little bit. And the other thing that I will mention is there's dialogue here, but it's not attributed. Typographically, there's a M dash that sets off the dialogue. So when I read dialogue, I'll make this hand gesture so that you'll know that's what I'm doing. So I'm just going to start now, after having said all of that. And there's a lot more that could be said. But I think those are the particulars that you need to know. And you're welcome to ask me questions afterwards if none of this is clear. And I'll try to answer that. So, this baronial all is all for T.S., which is the Baroness's nickname for Thelonious Monk. His middle name, he was Thelonious Sphere Monk. His middle name was Sphere. So he's T.S. This baronial all is all for T.S., if not his benefit, then at least for the sake of his name. Most will wonder, of course. Some of these most might even make an audible show of their wonderment, should they respect the traditions of announcement. And some, among them both others and the same, even ponder the indomitable extravagance of all this togetherness. Some do, of course. Some are fast together, and so yet to be briskly dispersed. Nika, the Baroness, is not among their numbers. The Baroness is, as is Nellie. Don't you knows have it, as a matter of fact, that the Baroness has several other apartments well socked away in the city proper, penthouses and presidential suites by some aspersions, flops and flea bags in the thin columns where other envies allude. And who does this Baroness hide behind the frills of her nom de guerre? What most sociable bumblebee was last seen fluttering about her lair? A dragonfly for Lady Dragon. Brief me, Jackson, brief me. I can't keep the undersecretary and her affairs waiting. You know what I've always said. She's beautiful in parts. Spoken like a true suffragist. Oh no, not me, my friend. My Underground Railroad is a coattail. It must be quite a drain on the bank account, depending perforce on how roger you get on the business of bottomless. Remember when coffee could be had for 5 cents a cup? It wasn't so long ago, but how quickly the free filler-up has bred in us a taste for hogwash. Think what a nickel would be worth a bicentennial from now. Give me liberty or give me compound interest. Better to borrow a kid congressman than cast your lots with the shareholders of venerable Gelt. I always say, look, you can't snatch your own purse, not any more than you can manhandle your own knockwurst. You need a Dr. Kinsey for that. Sure, she may look like a mountain of baked Alaska, but all it takes is one bite. The punch, it's 1 part pork, 3 parts rutabaga. If you'll allow me, I'd be happy to elaborate. Speaking pseudo-literarily, I can tell you that it's an old family recipe. And so, before being zipped up, as Nika is plucking her eyebrows and powdering under her arms, the evening's most ominous phenomenon whispers from burrow to burrow. A Bentley begins ingurgitating musicians from all over the city, and in the middle of rush hour, no less. The actors cast in this play are invariably Negro, the leading members featuring lighter-skinned or making cameos under Caribbean names. And they stagger out of their unknown dwellings in Manhattan or Canarsie or Sugar Hill or Jamaica or Hollis or even Union City. They stagger out to squint crankily, and whether out of habit or in private parody of their putative alienation, not even the Baroness, presently out of earshot, she is fastening her necklace, and so tightly it pulls her chin forward, could distinguish. The sun has now just rotated below a dirty meridian of clouds. It resembles a coin, and it is about as cold. The musicians come and stand at the corner or the curb, and they sniff at the rain in the ground. They stoop to roll up the cuffs of their pants, where they half genuflect and give the things they blow, some encased in contours, other demonstrative in their patina, a rest. They flex the muscles of their hands, gloved not by wool, only hours of practice. And if these fellows continue to look a little preoccupied or gnomic, if they nod or slide off and on and around in their own feet, one should be advised that it is only because they still have a few toes in dreamland, or they have just gotten up from a bounty of greens, black-eyed peas, hot tamales, fostered bananas, grapette, royal crown. The chauffeur has been given his instructions. He has been instructed to firmly grasp each man by the humerus, but he does so with palpable hesitancy. Years of driving have not been good preparation in how to be simultaneously masculine, anatomically accurate, and amiable, and steer them towards the long black automobile whose white leather upholstery should already be cradling so much like an egg carton. These fellows, they are the eggheads who run their own little think tanks. But is this the analogy one finds least aggravating? Several colleagues. As the chauffeur is himself plastering his face with a nothing to fear beaming, his companions in responsibility maintain expressionlessness. As in some staged moodiness trying to pass as candid, the musicians appear to be meditating on their own innervation. Eyelids closed in prayer don't lid like that. The musician believes, perhaps, that he has somehow been transported into the photograph that will cement the fantasy of his debut platter, that the driver is producing him towards a presenting or an introducing his own name as, and neither above nor below, the title. And so the musician cannot be easily initialed. The chauffeur tightens his grip. Through threadbare clothes and flesh, one can picture the hidden holes, the unhealed abscesses. The chauffeur feels gristle, a pulse modulating so slowly it might be irregular. The chauffeur loses count. These players, they are living their unique exhaustions out on the street as those exhaustions are mustered and await fortune, collected, restive, and coolly coping with everything from annoyance to trained skepticism, from the joyful ramifications of their own phobias to as yet unenthroned ferocity. All ham fats will be carved tonight, from tribute to gratitude. The Bentley is braking, languidly swooping in, all matte black and steely curvaceousness. The chauffeur's man leans into the line of approach as if to run, looking for that instant, then ready to be knocked over by another man, the jamf who must have jived out some way to hail a cab here among the uncommitted, the pagans, the iconoclasts. In case of outright resistance, the chauffeur has his spiel. One is to remove one's cap, tuck it under one's arm, pull one's heels together, and bow slightly, not so much out of courtesy, but because it disturbs the bareness, the contrast between the silver thatch on one's head and the grease paint black of one's eyebrows. Could the Baroness get her way with any consistency, one would always and in every role perform behatted. Hair, whatever, you are expected. Please, as you know, I am unable to provide you private car fare. The Baroness trusts me only with a roll of dimes to use on public telephones. Opening his mouth as if to start his filibuster, the chauffeur's accosted instead performs that swallow characteristic of the heavy smoker. It is a gulping rest, the lips pushed together and outwards towards the chauffeur in a countervailing embouchure. For what ferments in the throat must be de-burped in the throat. So the musical esophagus draws some fiber more turgid and solid and stickier than either words, whatever their flair, or however denunciatory, or the burly, expanding gray heat of habit, smokestacking those syllables further back, that is, down and into the lungs. By the time the chauffeur has flashed his badge of wrapped coins, he has become again a tiny fellow, faceless and of tinted glass, uncommunicative and efficient. He flips with rabbit fur and neoprene-lined hands a switch for the automatic door locks. The pickups already situated, coffeed and pie-eyed, they see to the new guests slipping in with a low-key chortling. Just the man we've been looking for. Come right on ahead. Get in on this jamboree. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Look here, fellas. It's another one of them premonitions. Driver, tell Miss Nika she better send along a bigger back seat. The chauffeur hurries, dead certain in his squared surveillance that his duty carries with it an uncanny reminiscence to some obtuse crime, a gathering and elimination of trouble elements in some massive yet particularized assassination. Might some pedestrians wonder, and not furtively, but with worthy alarm, is every colored male in town congregating somewhere? What news is this? Should one relay it after the good or before the bad? The driver, stopping against the signals, glances down the typed list of addresses entrusted to him and tries to pull his moistening cap over his ears. He does not wish to hear what someone else will soon preface with an, "You know what I heard?" He wants to stay well in advance of the scuttlebutt he's dragging like so many newlyweds' tin cans. One's instructions are to pretend as though all roads lead to Sunday. One's instructions are to the contrary, from there straight home. As for the musicians themselves, they may all be pressed in that back seat like bickering circus clowns waiting to be deposited on some gay doorstep into the strains of an a cappella calliope. Then again, the inky shimmer of the auto's exterior, one really only adopted from the fluid warp and woof of the pestering rain, might not camouflage an impossible capaciousness. The men might come and go one at a time. There might be a fleet of who knows how many such luxurious vehicles, each passenger lost in a plush rumble, unwittingly transported to whatever cockane it is he would most like to go, perhaps recognizing a tunnel's mouth or a turnpike's turnabout, but without any exertion of anticipation or pleasure, because he is just so glad to be back off his feet again for the moment, however long it may last. This both is and isn't how Nellie arrives. Whirlwinded and blurred out of her perspective, Nellie clutches a monkey in blues. Of all things, Nellie, the blues worst of all. Every blues is just a poor excuse for another blues. In her head, to match the note folded into fourths in her damp fat fist, she had hired her own car. And she had specially requested that the Baroness pen this note for her in lieu of the invitation she would never issue. And not just for Nellie, to anyone. Just in case. When it arrived in a manila envelope delivered by private courier, it came with a P.S. in the form of another note. Really, Cinderella, this is so unnecessary, but how I do get a kick out of humoring you. Yours, Nika. It is this that Nellie has brought with her, not the stationery with the marbled margins and the big central blank filled with date, time, address, and cancellation protocol. She'd rather have this ransom, so decorously sued for this is Nellie's case. She has decided there can be no other paper passed between them. Nellie has crossed the baronial threshold. Finally, the front door had not been sealed, much less locked. The entryway and the halls are long and arrogant and dark, save for the ballroom's incandescent shadows stretching with a fraudulent puniness at her feet. Nellie waves her handbag and then her foot at the cat and the dandy things it would shed on her. The animal bolts into its full length like a switchblade, skitters, lands on a lope, models for Nellie a jack of spades pucker under a sable hood. These whiskers are going to sit where they are going to sit, a mere pace away, and erect all the thank you very much. The spade of the cat's jaw jumps once, twice. It closes its eyes in a grin that's nosy about the clinks scampering the air. Nellie makes a spitting sound in her head. She feels the occupancy of the ballroom, and feeling how full it is, she feels its detecting indifference. What if she had visited this place before? What if she were returning? Nellie retells the stories she stuffed up in the cracks of the Baroness's phone call that frigid May morning, which is the morning of Monk's arrest. What if the Baroness had told her, "Come over, quickly, you're needed here"? A fetched Nellie. She would have been not distraught but morose, so long unexposed to how the temperature drops outside city limits. She would have locked up the flat but forgotten to pick up her shawl. arriving in Weehawken, decked out not much more than a match girl. The Baroness, mistaking the trembling for